So let's examine the area of gamification, and no better man to talk about this than Mark Nagurski. He's the founder and chief executive of Culture Tech, Northern Ireland's innovation festival. Since launching Culture Tech in 2012, the event has grown to become one of the largest family-focused technology events in the UK and Ireland, attracting over 43,000 people in 2014. Why he's here? Well, in March, Culture Tech made headlines across the globe when they announced a new initiative to provide Minecraft Edu free of charge to every post-primary school in Northern Ireland, with the capacity to engage as many as 50,000 young people annually. Prior to founding Culture Tech, Mark was Derry's first digital champion, tasked with the development of digital industries. He's going to talk to you about gamification. Give a huge round of applause to Mark Nagurski, ladies and gentlemen. Okay.
Good morning. First of all, lovely to see so many bright faces on a Saturday morning before lunchtime. I suppose I can kind of skip the basic introduction. My name's Mark. I'm Culture Tech's chief executive. We set it up in 2012. I'm not going to bore you with details about the festival. If you want to go find out about it, it's culturetech.co. It'll give you all the info. But suffice to say, when we started the festival back in 2012, initially, it was just an industry event. So my background isn't even in tech. We've worked in business development programs and such over the last 15 odd years or so. And we started working with the tech space and the tech industry, and we created an event for them in Derry in the Northwest. And the first year we had a great time, but it was industry only. And immediately following that event, we had lots of conversations with the attendees and the delegates, and we said, well, what do you want? Did we get it right this year? Did we have the right kind of subjects? And universally, and I do mean this universally, the conversation was around skills development, hiring, and accessing talent. There was nothing else on anybody's agenda. Everybody was in the same boat. And that got us thinking that we needed to start doing something in education. So over the last couple of years, between 2012 and September just gone, we kept the industry side of it, but we really started to grow out the educational piece and what we did with schools and kind of opening the things up to general public. And that allowed us to grow the event from about 8,000 attendees in the first year to 43,000 last year. But most importantly, 75% of that audience is under 25. And that's the audience we speak to. So because we were doing that, we were getting invited in lots of schools and we were having conversations, and that was brilliant. And it was pretty straightforward stuff. We'd come in, we'd talk about the industry, we'd tell kids about careers that they could have in the future. Everybody was happy. But because we were doing so much of it and because it was so time-consuming, we figured we needed to go and do something a little bit different. We actually needed to build out some outreach programs that had a little bit more scale and oomph to them. And use those then to feed back in to help grow the festival a little bit. So that's really what I'm going to talk to you about over the next 10-15 minutes. I'm just going to share our experiences from the last 12 months of developing a couple of educational outreach programs, how we've kind of taken them from standing start. In February last year was the first time we'd had anything formal, and developing it to the point where, yes, we have just put Minecraft into every single secondary school in Northern Ireland, and got that paid for by the public purse, which was nice. Right? So I'm going to tell you how to do that. So if anybody wants to put Minecraft in their school, I'll tell you exactly how to do it. But anyway, before we do that, I want to introduce you to somebody. This is Jonathan, right? I'm going to tell you a little bit about Jonathan. Jonathan, I just met recently. Actually, it's a bit of a lie. I've never actually met Jonathan. Jonathan lives in Derry. He's 18 years old. He's just about to go off to uni. And the reason I met Jonathan, very simply, is Jonathan is going to be paying for his university education on the basis of the fact that he builds commercially Minecraft maps, right? So he's 18 years old, he's been doing it for a couple of years, and people pay him, people commission him to build maps in Minecraft. If you're not familiar with Minecraft, you should be, one. Secondly, there's 100 million players across the globe. And thirdly, there are lots of what they call servers, which people can go on and explore and involve themselves in the worlds that people have created. And that is a commercial endeavor, and Jonathan gets hired in the same way as an artist or a graphic designer or any other developer might be, to create these maps. And we recently commissioned Jonathan to build us a map of Derry City Centre, so he's doing it. He's building it on a 1-to-1 scale, so literally you can walk through it in exactly the same amount of time it would take you to walk through Derry City Centre. He's doing that on top of a map that's been created by Ordnance Survey in the UK, which maps the entirety of the UK in 1-to-1 scale. And all of that is feeding into a publicly funded project which is going out into 214 schools in Northern Ireland. Here's the point. When I was Jonathan's age, I was stacking shelves in Duns, right? And it was already brought up this morning on the panel that, yes, we are absolutely educating kids for jobs that we have no idea what they're going to be. I think it's much worse than that, right? I think that's right. Yes, of course we don't know what these jobs are going to be. But if you start meeting people like Jonathan, you start to think, this resembles nothing that I know, nothing that I understand, right? Here's an 18-year-old kid who's probably making 20, 25 grand a year, sitting in his bedroom, about to go off to university, and to be blunt, has our education system really done anything to make that happen, right? It's a question, it's not a statement, but we have to start questioning are the skills we're teaching, are the things that we're working with in the classroom feeding into Jonathan and the Jonathans to come? And I think for us, and this is really where we come from the industry side of it, there are two real components of it. One is the technical side. It's teaching kids how to code, use hardware and software technologies, become properly digitally literate. When we talk about literacy in an English context, we don't just mean they can read it. They have to read it and write it and understand it and compare and contrast. We need the same thing in the technology space. But we also need some of those other softer skills that we've been talking about, the critical thinking, design thinking, all of those other elements, innovation skills. And in a funny sort of way, I think over the last couple of years, we've actually started to do okay on that side of it. It's certainly not a done deal. Yes, absolutely, the revolution is still going on, but the work that organizations like Code.org and Coder Dojo and the Raspberry Pi Foundation and individual teachers across the globe, the work that they're doing is feeding into that quite nicely. So the direction of travel is right, if not the destination just yet. And funnily, I think, and certainly this is kind of the view coming from industry as well, is that on this side of it, those skills are still lacking, possibly because every single curriculum I've read from the last 5 or 6 years, and we've read a lot of them, has all those things in it. It says kids need to learn how to be collaborative, they need to learn critical thinking, they need to learn creative skill sets. All of those things are there, but they're all cross-cutting themes that go across everything. You know, there's no class that you walk into and say, okay, today is Year 12's innovation class. That doesn't really happen very often. And because of that, some of these skill sets kind of get left to the side. So, really, just before we jump into it, it's just that. How do we educate Jonathan and all the other Jonathans? And I'll ask you just one thing to think about over the next probably 7 or 8 minutes now. What would it look like if we got this right? What would it look like if all the kids coming through our education system understood both the technical side and can use the tools that are available to them, but at the same time had this passion and understanding about innovation and design, creative thinking, and problem solving? Sometimes they come hand in hand, but I'm not sure if our education system is quite getting both of them delivered to the same degree. So how do we educate Jonathan? Anyway, been asked to talk about gamification. I've spent the first 5 minutes not talking about it, so I'll get to it. Gamification, where does this come into it? So obviously through the festival, a big part of what we do is video games. We have a big video game presence, both from an industry side of things and just for a bit of fun. And we could see immediately, and this won't come to any surprise for anybody, is that video games are engaging. Kids like playing video games, right? That's not rocket science. But the question immediately comes into our head is that how do you use that level of engagement and the sheer fun that kids have around it to actually then go on and create a learning experience or an educational experience from that? If you haven't checked these people out before, please do. Institute of Play, they're based over in New York. They're really an exceptional organization. And I think they've kind of put a pin in it in terms of the things that games and gamification and gameplay and game-based learning can do. And it's really those two things for me. It's how do we engage people in an interesting way, and how do we build those critical skills like problem solving, like collaboration, like innovation. And that's all well and good, but we're still stuck with exactly the same question. And no, I'm not going to explain it if anybody doesn't know what that means, right? We're stuck with exactly the same problem. How do we take these game concepts and actually implement them in the classroom? Short of literally turning on the Xbox in the corner and say, crack on, how do we actually do this? Because while there's been lots of conversations around it, there's been very little actual program created for it. Very few people have sat down and say, well, let's write out, how do you use Minecraft to teach history? Which is surprising because there's 100 million players worldwide. But nobody's really done that work. So that's kind of where we got stuck into it. That's how we've approached it. And it's really when we started to think about games not just in their isolation in the context there, but how could they feed into things like project-based learning that we started to get a little bit of traction. We tried lots of different ideas very early. Some of them were successful, some of them weren't. I won't tell you about the ones that weren't, but I'll talk you through a couple of the ones that we found were actually beneficial. All of them started to combine these two things. It took things out of gaming, which we thought added to that engagement level. Things like creating strategies, things like fun, things like using digital skills and digital tool sets. Yes, things like dying and understanding risk and understanding in a game you can always press reset and go back, do it all over again. All of these things spoke to the kind of ideas we wanted to get into the educational program we were creating. But we also knew from project-based learning activities, you could put across collaboration skills and communication skills and all of these sort of things. And we heard some excellent examples, things like First Lego League exactly do this. And for us, we started to kind of dissolve that line between what was a game and what was a project and come up with this lovely little hybrid, which we think has worked reasonably well. So just to talk you through some examples of that, starting with the first one we tried, which was in February last year. So we looked at things like science fairs and stuff, and we thought these are great. But what we wanted to do is introduce a digital tool set into that. And we also wanted to allow the kids to be a little bit more, introduce some of the creative skills as well. So not just, here's my science project and here's a little stand to show it off. So what we invited kids to do, and we did this in about 40 schools as a pilot, we invited kids to actually go out and make short science films, right? So they could take any STEM-related subject that they liked and make a short film about it, and enter those in the same way as they would enter their science project. So some kids went out and did fairly straightforward. This is me putting Mentos in a Diet Coke bottle and that kind of thing. But some of them were really amazing. We had one of the winners was a 5-minute animated piece, which they did entirely themselves. Other groups are using stop motion animation to create little characters. One did it entirely in plasticine, and they were interviewing people like Albert Einstein. So they were having to work through these methods. They were having to write their own scripts. They were having to film and edit and using all those creative skill sets. But the subject matter was something that was on the curriculum. The subject matter was something they were going to have to learn anyway. This was a different way of doing it. So we did that pilot. It was very good. We've now extended it. It's about 3 times the size this year. We're in about over 100 schools with it. It's just completed. And at the end of it, all the kids then come to a red carpet ceremony where we hand out prizes and say, brilliant. It's a bit like the Oscars. We call it the STEMmies, right? That's trademarked, by the way. All right? So please go and have a look at it. That picture there is the winners from the first year. We took their prize was they got a trip to CERN. So we were literally just over there with them a couple of weeks ago, and it was awesome. So fast forward a little bit, and that had been reasonably successful, and we were happy to continue it. But what we thought from that one is a lot of gameplay is self-directed. And I think there's something inherently valuable in kids setting out with a problem and finding their own ways to solve it. Obviously with a bit of direction and mentorship, brilliant, but finding their own solutions to big challenging problems. So we partnered with the Northern Ireland Science Park last year to create. We gave 6 young people a summer internship, and we set them a very simple task. We want you to run a technology conference. A bit like this, right? Everything from top to bottom. They had to plan who the speakers were, they had to invite them, they had to get the audience there, they had to sell tickets, they had to raise all their money from scratch, they had to market it, produce it, direct it on the day, and everything was in their control, right? We made no decisions. The only thing that we did was convene it, and we underwrote it. So if they did screw it up, somebody was still going to pay the bills, right? So there was a bit of a safety net there. What actually happened is the kids went off, the 6 of them, they appointed a CEO, they appointed a marketing director, all of these things on their own accord. They produced an event which had, about 20 speakers from literally all over the world, over 300 attendees, and they raised over £15,000 themselves to fund the event. It took place during Culture Tech in September, just gone. Funnily enough, we've already got the second one teed up, and we see this as a thing that could go anywhere. If anybody wants to take that model and rip it off, please feel free. As long as you got 6 kids that you're excited about, you'll really be surprised at what they can do. And again, for us, that was about that self-directed learning piece. When they started, none of them had ever run an event before. None of them ever fundraised or gone out and found sponsors. They ran a Kickstarter campaign. They had to create all the media assets around that. They did all of that themselves. We literally just stood on the sideline and pointed them in the right direction when they needed a question answered. The third one is a little bit more simplistic. The BBC had created a series of short videos, YouTube-style videos, and you would have seen them. Nothing, I don't want to criticize them, but it wasn't anything particularly, groundbreaking. It was STEM videos, and they were really interesting. But they were struggling with engagement. Particularly, watching a video is a very lean-back activity. You sort of sit there and you go, oh, okay, that's great, I've enjoyed that. But how do you make that engaging? How do you make that participatory? How do you do those sort of things? So we were commissioned to create a small series of classroom-based exercises which could be done that enhance the learning from the videos. So the idea is at the beginning of the class you could sit down and watch a sample of the videos and then you could take what you've learned from that and the subjects from that, and then there was a classroom activity to go with it. And again, fairly simple. Please go onto myscienceshorts.com. You can download the materials. It's all free. Anybody can have a look at it, play with it, do whatever you like with it. What we learned from that, though, was very simple, is that we needed to find those things that were lean in rather than lean back. Because creating amazing little videos, and these videos are very well produced. They have professional animation, all this sort of stuff commissioned by the BBC, but the level of engagement, despite the fact that they were awesome videos, was relatively low. But creating a simple activity in the classroom, something that people could participate in, changed the dynamic entirely. And then on to the big one. So this has literally just kind of happened in the last couple of months. Last September, we had the guys over from Minecraft EDU. They're a company based in Finland. They've created effectively a teacher moderation tool that sits on top of the standard Minecraft game. So as the teacher, you can put the kids in a particular area of the game, you can pause kids, you can put them in timeout, and there's this library of content that you can use to teach all sorts of different subject matters, from history to Java coding to Python, whatever you want to teach, there's probably some sort of basic content out there. And we thought the pilot they did for us in September last year was cool, so very speculatively, we put this bid in, right? And we said, actually, you know what would it look like if we could put this in all the schools, right? So to balance that out, we picked all the post-primaries in Northern Ireland, which is about 214 schools, and we figured very simply that the argument was this, is that this had to be a universal thing, otherwise we'd get back to the haves and have-nots of the schools that could afford it or couldn't afford it. But if we can get rid of that immediately, we could have a project which had a modicum of scale and could teach us a little bit about whether or not these things were working. And I'll come back to scale in a second. But anyway, we launched it. We got the okay for it at the end of February. We launched it literally 4 weeks later. The whole program has been rolled out. 214 schools, about 40 libraries, community centers, coder dojos. And we should have a reach of about 50,000 kids. We're doing about a year group per school. We've installed it in over 150 schools now already. And literally just in the last couple of weeks, some of the feedback and some of the projects that are being developed are absolutely amazing. And it's really the teachers that are leading the charge on it. I mean, I'll be honest, some teachers are going, what is that? Don't want to touch it, that's fine. But other teachers are getting really stuck in and figuring out ways to teach history using the video game, to teach civics using the video game, to teach physics using the video game. Because the level of engagement is immediate. The kids are sitting in a class, and again, a lot of this is anecdotal at this point, but the kids are sitting in the class, and they're staying there through their lunchtime. And they're staying after school, because they want to continue to work on the project that they started. And it is as simple as that. So if you ask them to recreate some Roman fort, they'll sit and they'll do it. And they'll label it, and they'll understand it. And they'll go and do their research, and they'll look up what the forts look like online, and they'll find 3D models to import into the game. They'll do all of that without any direction from the teacher, because they want to do it. They're familiar with it. They're already engaged. And that, for us, we don't know if Minecraft is going to be the thing that's there in the next 3 years. That's by the by. It's a tool that's available to us now. It's a tool that the kids are already comfortable using. And it's a tool that's entirely open-ended. It allows them to go and do whatever they want. And that's what's really exciting about it, is the kids are developing the programs and projects themselves. They're being pointed in the right direction, but the learning becomes self-directed. And one thing that's very interesting to us is it's starting to redefine what the successful kid looks like in the classroom, right? I think one thing we do struggle with, north and south in this country, is we have fairly narrow definitions of what successful looks like. So you go off, you get your good grades, you go to the right university, you become the solicitor, the lawyer, the public servant, whatever. That's success. Well, somebody like Jonathan is starting to tell me that the success could be the kid that did poorly in education, and I don't know if he did, but let's say he did, right? We don't know, but he's got creative skills, he's got innovative skills, he's got problem-solving skills, he's got an intent to go and do things himself, and that then becomes successful. There's no national award for who the best Minecraft modder is in the country. And I think that is actually a problem. Why don't we celebrate those skills in exactly the same way as we do getting an A in your leaving cert in physics? Those are the kind of things we need to start thinking about. So this is what we think works. And a lot of this kind of maps back to the earlier panel and the first speaker in terms of there's a lot of similarities between the projects that we've developed and what we've seen successful other places. Everything is project-based. Everything where we can, try to link it back to some sort of relevant real-world challenge. We've not been entirely successful in doing that every time, but it's an increasing area of focus. We're trying to redefine what successful looks like. So the kid in the class who never quite got physics, but is now actually a really cool filmmaker, they can actually do well in the physics class because they're using a different set of tools. It's always subject aligned, and I don't think there's any way around that. One of the concerns we've always had is, are we lumping more and more and more workload onto the teachers? There's a finite amount of time. Project-based learning in principle sounds awesome until you actually have to go and do it. And then it takes up a huge amount of time. So how do we make sure that if it is going to be, we are asking for more time, how do we make sure we're still meeting those basic criteria that we need to do? And they always use digital tools. And again, that's not just about code. Sometimes it's about video making, editing, sound design, video games, all these sort of things. And that's really kind of where we're at the moment. And a final point on that is that this is where we think the problem lies. All right? So that's all well and good. And one of the reasons we were really interested in Minecraft as a platform, as a project, is because it immediately offered us a level of scale. Now, scale is actually really important. All right? I would hazard a guess that every single teacher in this room has been involved in a pilot project at some point. Right? We are awesome at doing pilot projects. And by definition, a pilot project should then turn into, if it's successful, an actual project. Right? But most times, even if they're successful, is they don't. Right? And one of the issues behind that is an issue of scale. Scale is actually a really beneficial thing. And sometimes we look at it in a negative sense. We think about standardized testing and such. That is scale, of course. But there's other types of scale. Having big projects, funnily enough, actually sometimes makes it easier to find money for them, particularly from a commercial aspect. And again, this goes back to our industry experience. You know, when we're working with partners and sponsors there, and we're doing a pilot in 5 schools, they're like, that's lovely. And then we tell them we're working with 50,000 kids. They go, awesome, here's the checkbook. Right? So scale does make an absolute difference in terms of putting projects together. It also allows community to form. Again, if you have a group of 5 or 6 teachers working on the project, you can be quite intensive. There's lots of things to learn, which is brilliant. But casting an even wider net and getting more people involved brings more ideas and more resources to the table. So again, finding things that inherently have scale built into them is becoming increasingly important. And for us, there's also just a social justice piece to this. Because what we've found in so many of the things that we've worked through and so many of the projects we've been involved with, we see the same schools at the front of the queue every single time. So how do you make sure that all the other schools, the teachers in this room, to be frank, we don't need to talk to you, right? You're awesome. You're doing these things. You're involved in First Lego League, or you're running our code, or you're sending the kids onto Coder Dojos. Whatever you're doing, you're already doing these things, right? But there's an awful lot of other teachers who aren't, or can't access them because of where they are geographically, or they don't have the funds in the school to be able to pay for them. Whatever those things are, there is an issue that says we are picking from a very shallow pool. And again, going back to our industry experience on it, that is a massive issue. Immediately, we're saying there's big chunks of the population we're not interested in working with. That's bizarre, right? So scale is a way of fixing that. But the problem with scale is very simple. Nobody's created the content for it. With the exception, and this is a very obvious exception, of things like First Lego League and Code.org and all of these great things, nobody's really kind of done all that homework. Nobody's ever answered the question that says, how do you use Minecraft to teach the entire curriculum? And that's a problem, because until you start having those resources, scale is very tricky. Everything is anecdotal. Everything is I did this, you should try that, which has a benefit, but it stops things growing fast. So just to leave you on, and you can go and have a chat to us afterwards on this, this is what we're doing about it. Because we've got so involved in it, because we've had such an awesome time over the last 12 months, we're actually launching a new company. And literally just to create educational content using these new tools and trying to fix some of those problems around scale. We're going to be working with teachers to define what they're trying to teach and what they're struggling with. We're then going to work with commercial organizations, philanthropic organizations to fund the development of content. And most importantly, we're then going to give it away to every teacher anywhere on the planet for free. And that will launch in September, October this year. And that is just, again, to answer that original question, is how do you scale up to a degree where the amazing work that you guys do can reach every Jonathan on the planet? And that's something we really haven't grasped yet. How do we get out there and reach all of those Jonathans, not just the ones that are lucky enough to be in your classroom? That's me. Please get in touch. Also, if you'd like to come up and see us, we're in September. I know, great date for a teacher, don't ask. 11th to the 20th. Please come and see us at Culture Tech. And also, if you're involved in Coder Dojos or would like to know more about them, we're actually hosting DojoCon as well this year as part of the festival, which will be on the second weekend. That's it. Thanks for listening. Cheers.